The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Win at Travel SEO and Avoid Being a Scare Story. My name is Sarah and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Sagittarius, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. I would also like to introduce you to today's presenter, Josh Whiten, who is our Digital Marketing Director. Today's webinar will last around 45 minutes and hopefully consist of 30 minutes of webinar and 15 minutes of questions. We will be taking any questions at the end of the webinar, so please could I ask you to type your questions into the chat or questions box within the webinar portal, and we will answer these all at the end. We will also share the slides from today's webinar with all of the delegates this afternoon. So before any more delays, I'll hand you over to Josh.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome along to How to Win at Travel SEO, our webinar, which is our Halloween special. It was kind of a coincidence. We planned it for today, but actually the Halloween theme fits very well with our topic, as hopefully you're going to see as we run through. So, as Sarah said, I'm a Digital Marketing Director here at Sagittarius. We are a digital marketing agency with around a team of 50 in 4 offices around the world. We specialise in digital performance, really, and what that means is digital marketing that drives traffic and creates fans across various e-commerce websites and platforms. And the specific services that those 2 areas include are as follows. We currently work with and have worked with many different travel brands, and travel is in fact our largest specialist vertical within the agency. So this is an area, travel and SEO, is that we've got a lot of experience in, and we've won lots of awards, we're pleased to say, and you can see in there some very travel specific ones: travel marketing, travel mold, Travolution, etc. So that's enough about us and myself. Just wanted to sort of dwell for a moment on who we think you probably are likely to be, and really just to sort of reinforce who today's webinar is pitched at. So you're likely to be a marketing manager or executive. You could be a digital marketing specialist working in search or performance marketing. You could well be more of a CMO or head of marketing. Or you could even be MD or a business owner of a smaller travel brand. But one thing you've probably got in common is you're probably likely to find SEO a bit scary, particularly in the travel sector. So this is the start of our Halloween theme, as you can see, which I'm going to carry on throughout. If you don't find SEO scary in the travel sector, there are some good reasons why maybe you should be scared. You know, you're all under pressure to improve your organic performance, obviously, and you're looking to compete in search results and have that pressure. But also there's that fear of trying to protect your share of the search market, of that sort of visibility that you've gained and built over time. Some of you may unfortunately even had to recover from an SEO disaster, which can be a pretty scary experience in itself when your traffic suddenly plummets as well as your rankings. So really what we're going to talk about today are just ways that you can avoid becoming an SEO horror story with your website. Travel and SEO does have some very specific features or aspects, which I'm going to come back to during the course of today's webinar. But in particular, I just wanted to highlight, you know, the focus on destinations and content in particular. That's a key aspect that we find we have to work with travel SEO. Managing inventory of product and trips is also a specific aspect. International SEO is a broader topic, but we find is often very relevant for travel brands. But as well as all of this, you've always got in the background, lurking in the shadows, the ever-present OTAs, online travel agents, who are there sort of often winning in search results, but certainly very, very strongly competing with you. And as travel brands and tour operators, you're often looking to try and steal the march on them. So what are we going to go and explore today? Well, we're going to look at some SEO scare stories, because everyone loves to see a good example of where other people maybe have gone a bit wrong. And then we're going to look at zombies, cannibals and gremlins. I'll explain more later. And then we are going to look at some cures and fixes, so some ways to solve these issues and prevent them happening again in future. So let's start with cannibals. Now, you may or may not know, but cannibalization in SEO is actually a thing. It's a really key aspect of our SEO work that we do in particular, It's trying to identify cannibalization and cure it for clients. So what this means is actually cannibalization is really caused by conflicting content within the same website. If we have several different pieces of content or URLs all competing for the same search term, that creates confusion for search engines with a net result, but it will really drag down your rankings overall or create a glass ceiling effect where you'll just never be able to break through to page 1. And really, but in a nutshot, it's because there's no clear winner for Google and other search engines to choose which page or version of a page should they choose to show in search results. Duplicate content in its many forms is often the main cause of cannibalization. So it's where you've got duplicate versions of the same URL, the same section within the site, or even duplicate versions of the whole site itself. Let's look at some specific examples now of cannibalization, and let's start with international, because this is a very common one that we come across. And this really is where you've got the wrong international version of your website showing in the wrong local market. That could be, as you can see there, a CCTLD, a country code top level domain, such as a .de or a .co.uk. Or it could be a subdomain, which might be d. your domain name, or it could be a subfolder, so that would be your domain name .co.uk or .com rather /de for the German market. International cannibalization can even impact on your brand terms. Someone might search for your brand in New Zealand and be shown the US version of your website with completely different product inventory, language, and localization. So that's a really bad user experience and damaging to the brand, in fact. The main cause and the cure is usually something called an hreflang tag. Some of you may have come across this. It's a special tag that goes within the code of your website that tells search engines which version this specific page is aimed at for which different sort of a country and language combination. So normally these are lacking if you're getting problems or haven't been deployed correctly, and really rolling them out thoroughly and properly across the country versions of your website is normally the main thing you need to do to fix international cannibalization. However, we always like to go one step further and try and reinforce that localization through localized content and also some off-page backlinking at a local level to really reinforce to search engines which version of the site is for which market. So international is one main common form of cannibalization we come across. Here is a little example. This is a tour operator targeting, in this case, American tours, and in this case, Google UK search results. And I mentioned earlier this kind of glass ceiling effect. You can see these are their daily rankings over the period year to date, and you can kind of see through into the summer, and you can kind of see that they're ranking around 30 or lower, which is obviously sort of page 3 or lower of search results. So it's really not very impressive for quite a high volume search term, and over time it's actually fluctuating a lot and on a downward path. Why is this? Because when we look at which URLs are actually showing in search results, in UK Google this is, we can see, lo and behold, we've got US versions of 2 of those 7 different URLs. This is a good example of wider cannibalization as well. And there's some other little nasties in here I'm going to come back and show you later on in this particular case study. But the main point here is it's really not helping with the US versions of content competing with the UK version of the site in Google UK. So another common form of cannibalization is what we have kind of dubbed destination cannibalization, and this is completely specific to the travel sector. So it's a really relevant thing to be thinking about with your own site. And this is really around the destination, and it could be you've got different types of content. It could be a guide page, or it could be a search results page of different products for a specific destination in your site competing with each other, or you could have more specific locations competing with destinations as well. Here's an example of this from the travel sector, from a well-known UK budget holiday brand. So this is for the search term Glasgow hotels, pretty high volume key search term as you would imagine. And we can see here, this is going back the last 12 months, And we could see this site fluctuated a bit, but it was on page 1 because it was hovering at about rank 7 to 9 from the graph there. We can see sometimes it got up to rank 6 around February. And then we can suddenly start to see it fluctuating and again hitting that downward slope throughout the second half of this period for this search term. So its ranks now are well onto sort of bottom of page 2 or worse, which is as good as being invisible, really. Why is this happening? Well, we can see here in the table on the right, the main page / hotels in Glasgow, we would assume is the page that this brand wants to show in search results for this search term. But you can see throughout the whole time, the blue line at the bottom of the graph, that's one of this brand's Glasgow hotels. And then we start to see in the latter period the green version starting to flicker into search results. And when the green site is being shown by Google, you can see it's really dragging down the rankings of the red line as well there. So this is a classic example of very specific locations, in this case specific hotels, actually competing with the main destination search term. It's not just confined to hotels. Here's another example from a well-known budget airline. So this is the search term cheap flights to Dalaman. Again, a pretty high volume term, and with the being slightly more long tail with the term cheap flights in this term, we'd imagine this is quite a high value term and should convert well. Historically, you can see over to the left of the graph, they were really solid. This is going back a year again, really solid at ranking, looks around position 5 on page 1. Really good spot to be in. And then we can see it starts to dip and some fluctuation, and then again, it hits that downward path. And let's have a look at what URLs in the site are actually ranking for this term. Again, we can see throughout the whole period, the blue line along the bottom and sometimes appearing on page 2 of search results is their page for flights from Manchester to Dalaman. And then the green one is for flights from East Midlands Airport to Dalaman. And both these airports pages are competing with the main page for around flights to Dalaman. And the whole time this is happening and is left sort of unresolved, my view is it would just continue to drag down their rankings, and they're never really going to regain a page 1 position. So that deals with cannibalization. Now let's turn to zombies. Zombie content in SEO, what is it? Well, by this term, what we're talking about is really outdated content still lurking in search results pages. And in travel, it can often be around a specific product or trip content. And what you tend to find is this zombie content is replacing or competing with the latest version of that trip or tour with the latest content. So it's causing this cannibalization effect. It's often created as a result of an annual brochure release. So if you're updating your whole product inventory for the season every year, this is a key issue if you're not then doing your housekeeping and managing the older inventory. Zombies can creep up on you as well. So you could be lulled into a false sense of security because you may look at your rankings and say, hey, we're top 3, top 4 on page 1. We're doing really well for these core search terms, without realizing it's actually out of date content which is ranking. Is it the right content which is shown in search results? Is it the right version of that product? I've even seen some examples where sites have been brands have been complacent because they claim they have high rankings for sort of core terms, but it was such an old version of content which was ranking that the user couldn't even buy that product from that page. So they couldn't even convert. So that top ranking was really a complete waste of time. Here's another example for you. So this shows a tours site targeting the search term Thailand tours. And we can see here it's continually held down. It's kind of this glass ceiling effect. The ranking is a sort of from the mid 50s or below. That's really poor as a ranking. I mean, what's that? That's page 5, 6, 7 of Google. Does anyone ever sort of go that deep into search results? So let's look at what could be causing this. in this particular case, we've got 4 different URLs ranking for this search term over this time period. And 2 of them are historic previous brochure versions of that product or tour, in this case, the Thai Island Hopper product. And it's even been labeled up within the site that this is the version that was around until March 2017. And then we're able to assume there's newer versions then being used within the sites. Now, there may be some good commercial reasons why that's the case. They may still want visibility of that previous product. They may be travel agents linking to that, or there might be some unique information that wants to be retained. But this brand needs to understand the net result is it's actually dragging down their rankings overall. So personally, I would look to address that by possibly blocking those older pages to search results. I wouldn't maybe redirect them, because you could maybe use those pages as landing pages for pay-per-click campaigns still, while you've got this overlap period. But certainly I'd want to be blocking them to organic search so they stop competing with the newer versions. So now we're going to turn to gremlins. Those of you experienced with SEO will always know there's technical SEO, technical gremlins, which can cause little issues and problems throughout your site. And we're going to talk through some examples of those now. One of the biggest causes in our experience is site migrations. And the 2 main versions of these are botched platform migrations, and more commonly now HTTPS migrations. And this is where, and you may have seen some of the news we've been sort of circulating recently around latest browser updates with Chrome. This is where brands are seeing that actually we do need to finally migrate our sites from HTTP to HTTPS because of the perceived benefits for SEO and for the user. So these are the most common types of site migrations that we see. So I just want to share a case study around one of those, which primarily was actually a replatforming from one content management system onto another. And this particular client migrated around 50,000 pages onto this new platform. It was a holiday rental site specializing in the French market. But as well as this, they did also see some issues with the HTTPS and HTTP partial indexing. So some sections of the sites were actually appearing with both versions of HTTP and HTTPS. We also saw huge issues with a lot of historic 301 redirects, which had been put in place to manage older content, were overwritten as part of the migration. And all of this created a massive spike in crawl errors, and a huge spike in 404 errors can really damage the credibility of your website. So we did a lot of work with this client's in-house development team to resolve all of these issues. We got some amazing results as a net result of that. This particular client was shortlisted for a travel marketing award. And I'm just going to briefly show you just a quick sort of a 20-second video, which just highlights some of the benefits that can be gained from actually focusing on fixing some of these issues and curing and getting rid of your technical gremlins. So I'll just play that video now. So you can just see from some of those numbers there that this particular client, we managed to turn that around from a net loss of nearly 40% down traffic year on year after the migration to an improvement year on year to 16%, which is a really amazing turnaround. So let's look at another example now of a migration. And this is one we looked at earlier. So you might remember this example from American Tours, and we saw that we've got here circled the 2 international versions of the site, cannibalizing content. But I just wanted to highlight something else. Some of you may have noticed on this list of the 7 URLs competing for this search term. And that's, we've got HTTPS, but also these older HTTP versions of content as well, still lingering around in search results. Now, this is a real issue because Google will look at these as two different versions of the same content. We all know that in reality it's not, but pleasing search engines is really what SEO is all about, and making sure you're ticking all those boxes through really thoroughly looking after your site. And that really is a good example of this, again, this general sort of cause of those technical gremlins that are going to damage your SEO. And these could be, not just limited to these, but these are the most common things that really we just come across through poor housekeeping of your site. Often, just duplicate or incomplete metadata. And these are some of the real basic foundations of SEO. Not managing and resolving your crawl errors. Not managing your sitemap XML file or making sure that's submitted to Google and getting indexed properly, not regularly looking at 301 redirects that need to be put in place, and maybe not updating or using the robots.txt function to block specific pages within your website to Google, but you want users to see that you don't want them really competing with the rest of your content in search results. So we've run through some, good examples there of some of the most common types of SEO scares that we see in the travel sector. Let's talk a little bit now about how you can exercise these demons from your SEO strategy and try and improve your performance. The main approach really taken is quite a dramatic one, but it's kill or cure. You either want to kill these issues by driving a stake through the heart of them, or cure them and vaccinate your site against future infection. And we do that in a number of ways. Firstly, in terms of killing the issues. If you're identifying things like this is zombie content or cannibalized content that's happening in your site, what can you do about it? Well, you can use canonical tags, which would make a polite request to search engines that, we've got two close similar versions of the same product, but actually we'd rather you use version A, not version B, and you put that tag on the version B of the content. But it's not absolute, and it is just a request to search engines, and search engines may still ignore that. So a more radical approach would be actually to block the competing content completely using the robots.txt file, but we just talked about. And then personally, I would then go back into Google Search Console and use the remove from Google tool as well in there, just to really do a thorough job. You could look to do a redirect, and we always advocate a 301 redirect, not a 302 redirect, just as a side issue, but there's probably grounds for a whole nother webinar to discuss the pros and cons between those two, but just take it from me, you'd want to look at a 301 redirect. And in that case, you're saying we no longer want this page, but we are going to keep the SEO value it had and transfer it over to a new page or another page that it was competing with. You'll normally pass about 95% of the SEO history and value of that page over using a 301 redirect. If you've got several types of pages all really around the same content, you might look at those and say, actually, we could just merge all of these into one. Sometimes we call this kind of creating like a mega page. If you've got maybe, particularly around destinations, I've used this approach before, where we've got one page that had a map around the destination, another page with guide content, and then another page with property search results, product search results of a destination. And we actually merged all three of them into one master destination page, but using tabs on page to really manage that content. Or you could just look at the page that you really want to rank for a specific term that's maybe not doing as well, is being held back, and just actually improve that page, improve the optimization of that page itself, and expand the content on it. So that would be one way to sort of try and tackle some of these issues head on. You can already maybe start to see that it does sometimes involve making big decisions. If you're looking to sort of kill or merge or block content, you really need to just be sure that that business case is correct. Are you actually blocking the right content? We found some examples of pages showing that I feel maybe shouldn't be showing in search results, but possibly that brand's data might show that the traffic that comes in through those pages actually converts better than the more top level sort of main destination page. So you do need to look at that data, look at the traffic, find out if it does convert or not, or what's the role of that page within your user journey towards conversion. By doing that, you'll really de-risk any sort of blocking or redirecting content, because often I find clients are a little bit cautious about taking such what might seem a radical step. But as you've seen from that data that I've shared with you, unless you take these radical steps, you're never going to fix these issues. So taking action, moving forwards, you know, I think you could summarize the approach of the cure towards a lot of this horrible nastiness that you find with SEO in travel. This approach of find it, fix it, then check that that fix has worked, and then monitor. It is really an ongoing process. So everyone always says SEO never ends, really. It's never a one-off piece of work, but you can see with this approach, you constantly have to be looking at your site and your content and managing it correctly. And the other key thing you need is a really good SEO team who've got experience of these SEO nasties and, you know, really understand the travel sector and some of these nuances around things like destinations, and have the ability to get things fixed, but also the right tools for the job. So that's where your SEO team that are supporting you really are key. And if you'd allow me to say so, that's where we feel that we can help at Sagittarius. So we have a really experienced SEO team here who've done a lot of work in the travel sector, as you can tell. And we can maybe shine a light on some of the darkness around some of your SEO hidden horrors, show you how to fix them, but also prevent any future nightmares. And we work on a lot of this with our strategic partners at Pi Data Metrics, whose data I have used to share some of the examples that I've shown you in the webinar. It's a really valuable tool we use literally daily to sort of work with clients. And it's something we could use to help yourselves to really find out the history and where some of these issues could be cropping up. So basically, you need these guys, and that's who we think we are. We're kind of the Ghostbusters of travel SEO. So if you need more help, then we would be delighted to talk to you. So your next steps. So on the left there, I said you could request this free SEO investigation, and this is something we'd be really happy to do using our partners' data. We could have a real dig around, see what insights we can find, put together some recommendations, and then share all of that back with you through a screen share, completely free of charge, no obligation. But as you can guess, we love our SEO and love looking at different case studies, and love nothing better than burying down into the data to see what we can find. If you'd like to take up that offer, just reply to the email that you'll get later today when we're sharing today's webinar, and we'll be delighted to get that organised for you. Some of our team will also, including myself, will also be at World Travel Market next week. You can come find us on stand TT258, which is in the travel tech zone. So come along there, have a chat as well. You know, if there's time, we can go grab a coffee and look at some of the data around your site as well and see what we can find out there and then for you. So to finish off, I'd just like to thank you and hope what we talked about doesn't give you nightmares.
Thanks, Josh. I'm just going to go through a few questions that we've had in today. And the first one is from Philippa. And the question is, if the local flights to Dalaman from Manchester page pulls down the main ranking, what's the best way to go around this and to solve this issue?
That's an excellent question, and kind of what we were talking about, having to make these sometimes tough decisions, and also about those fixes that you can put in place. There are a number of different options.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Josh. I'm not sure if you
can. Hi there, everyone. Sorry, we had a bit of a technical problem there, and I think we lost the audio. So I will try and just pick up on that answer to the question, which was around how would you deal with a local sort of Manchester to Dalaman sort of page within a site competing with the main top level page. So as I was just saying, and I'm not sure at what point I dropped out, but very briefly, as I was saying, you could start with a canonical tag saying to Google, look, we'd rather you use the top level page. I don't think you'd want to block that Manchester to Dalaman page because, you know, users in Manchester could be accessing the site through that page. I think in this case, and having had a little look at the site in question, I think it's a case of fine-tuning the optimization of the content actually on page itself in this particular case. So of my strategies, it would be the improved one. So you really just want to really clarify that the top level flights to Dalaman page is targeting that search term, and that the Manchester to Dalaman page is targeting that search term. There's some quite simple things that could be done, for example, around the page title and the H1 heading on the page in this particular case, but would quite quickly fix that issue. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. And another one, if you resolve the duplicate content or duplicate pages, how long does it take your site to recover, and will it rank well again?
Very good question as well. And you know, always anyone who works in SEO is always slightly ambiguous when it comes to timings, and let me explain why that is. Often how quickly Google will respond to sort of SEO fixes we put in place will depend on the history of that site with Google, which is somewhat out of our hands. It would depend how often Google is indexing your site historically, how much content is gone, how much often your content's been updated in the past. So that's the first thing to say. We are a little bit hands tied by the sort of the indexing cycle which Google has adopted with your site. But let's assume it's a reasonable size site which has been reasonably well indexed. Some of those, sometimes you can see really quick results. So the French holiday rentals example that I showed you, I remember when we worked on that project, and some of the key things that we changed, we actually saw an immediate upturn in some core search terms and traffic within 2 to 4 weeks, in fact, which is incredibly fast in SEO terms. So sometimes it just needs, you know, unlocking. It just needs to help. You just need to help Google understand what page is it that you want to index and show, and then you can see results come through. That project then carried on for about another 4 to 6 months. So it's kind of anything between that time frame, 2 to 4 weeks, really, to 4 to 6 months. Some areas will improve quicker than others, and there's obviously techniques which we can use to try and speed up the whole process, to try and encourage Google to come and index the changes that we've made as quickly as possible. So hopefully that answers that.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have from today's webinar. So I'd just like to thank Josh for his time and presenting today's slides. We will share all of today's slides and the presentation recording with all of the delegates, and that will be later on this afternoon, if not tomorrow. So thank you very much for attending. We may see you at WTM next week. If not, we'll see you at another webinar soon. Thanks a lot, everybody.